tell you a story about betrayal. Not the kind that creeps up slowly over time, but the kind that blindsides you in the middle of a celebration, in front of flashing cameras and clinking champagne glasses. My name is Ava Kincaid. I am 38 years old. I am a senior program director, well, I was, at a company called Celestar Systems, headquartered just outside of Seattle. I have worked in aerospace strategy for over 16 years. Born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina, I moved to the West Coast chasing a dream that felt bigger than gravity. And I earned my seat at the table. I earned every sleepless night, every hostile boardroom, every last zero on every contract I ever brought in. So when I tell you I did not see the knife coming, I mean it. I never thought it would be someone behind me holding it, someone I had trusted. Just hours before everything crashed, I had done something no one else at Celestar had ever done. I closed a deal worth $1.18 billion with Strataverse, a leading space communications firm. 5 orbital satellites, 6-year lifecycle coverage, cutting-edge tech that would revolutionize how we think about deep space data flow. It was the largest contract in Celestar's 28-year history. People cheered when I walked out of that room. My name was trending on our internal network. They toasted me with Dom Perignon. There was even talk of a feature in Aerospace Executive Monthly. I was still shaking hands on the trade floor when my assistant texted me. Her words were simple. Effective immediately, your title has been changed to Client Liaison, Tier 2. Your salary is adjusted by 60%. Official memo to follow. I thought it was a mistake. I thought maybe she meant someone else. I sat down in the hotel lobby, still wearing my name badge, still smiling from the cameras, and opened my inbox. There it was. No congratulations, no explanation, just a cold 2-paragraph memo signed by Human Resources. They stripped me of my title and gutted my income by more than half, right after I brought in over $1 billion. I just stared at the screen. The noise around me faded. I could hear the ice melting in my untouched drink. Across the room, our CEO was laughing with a reporter, his hand resting on the shoulder of Joelle Rains, the woman I had mentored for years, the same woman who had started as my intern. Something inside me cracked. I felt it. That moment when disappointment curdles into fury. I did not cry. I did not make a scene. But I knew, deep in my bones, I would not let this slide. I remember exactly what I said to myself. I whispered it into my glass like a promise. This is not the end. This is your beginning. I had given this company nearly a decade of my life. I had sacrificed birthdays, vacations, relationships, even my health. And now they thought they could erase me with a memo? They thought I would just smile politely and carry their water as some mid-level liaison? No. They had no idea who they were dealing with. What they did not know was that this contract, the very one I had closed with Strataverse, had a small, quiet clause buried deep in the paperwork, a clause they all skimmed past, a clause that would become the spark to burn the whole place down. I looked around that lobby. I saw the false smiles, the corporate handshakes, the men in suits clinking glasses over work they never did. And I realized I did all of this. I built this, and I could take it with me. They thought they had played me, but I had written the rules, and I was just getting started. So yes, this story begins with a betrayal, but it does not end there. Because sometimes, when they push you into a corner, they forget one thing. Some of us come out swinging, quietly, precisely, and with a plan they never saw coming. I walked back into headquarters on a Tuesday morning, 5 days after the deal closed. I still remember the sound my heels made on the marble floor. It was the sound of someone returning home, someone who had given everything she had to a place, only to find out it no longer felt like hers. The receptionist barely looked up. No congratulations, no flowers, no warm welcome. Just a quick nod and eyes back to her screen. I thought maybe everyone was just busy. Maybe people were still digesting the news. After all, I had just brought in $1 billion contract. But the silence followed me all the way up to the 7th floor, where I used to have an office with a view. Only now, the plaque with my name on it was gone. In its place was a printed sign that said, "Reserved for Director of Global Growth, J. Rains." Joelle Rains, 33 years old. Sharp? Yes. Ambitious, no doubt. but nowhere near ready for what that title meant. I had trained her myself 3 years ago when she was fresh out of grad school. I showed her how to write a proper executive summary, how to manage a 3-way negotiation, how to hold eye contact in a room full of men twice her age. I even loaned her one of my jackets before her first board meeting. And now, she was leading my department. Her name was on the door and mine. Mine had been wiped from the system like I had never been there. That afternoon, a company-wide memo went out. Subject line, new leadership appointment. It welcomed Joelle Rains as the new director of global growth. No mention of me. No thank you for the billion-dollar contract. No farewell message. Just a quick 2-paragraph announcement, ending with the words, effective immediately. I read it 3 times. I thought maybe there was a mistake. Maybe they had accidentally left out the part where they explained this was a temporary shift or some kind of restructuring. But there was no mistake. It was clear. I was out. What hurt more than the demotion was the erasure. My name vanished from every internal slide deck, every roadmap, every timeline. I was no longer copied on emails. I stopped receiving invites to meetings I used to run. Joelle had taken my place so fully that some of the newer team members started treating me like I was just visiting from another department. One even asked if I was from logistics. I wanted to scream, but I smiled instead. The kind of smile you wear when you know something they do not. Because while they were busy celebrating her, they were still standing on a foundation I had built, and one I could quietly remove when the time was right. Later that week, my LinkedIn started to flood with messages. Most of them were polite, but they felt like little knives. Congratulations on your early retirement. Wishing you a relaxing next chapter. One even said, thank you for all you taught us. Enjoy the slower pace. I had not retired. I had not walked away. I had been shoved out the door by people who thought I would just go quietly. But I was not going anywhere. Not yet. In meetings, Joelle started using phrases I had coined in strategy sessions. Operational depth equals client trust. That was mine. She reused entire parts of my pitch deck during internal briefings, without changing the fonts. It was like watching a stranger wear your clothes and pretend they had always owned them. And no one said a word. Not because they did not notice, but because they were too afraid to stand beside someone the company had already written off. That is how it works in these places. One day you are the golden child, and the next, they act like you were never there. I would be lying if I said I did not feel bitter. I was angry, not just at Joelle, but at the culture that allowed this to happen. A culture that rewards proximity to power more than it rewards results. I had earned my place. I had delivered numbers no one else could match. And still, they chose someone younger, cheaper, more pliable. But what they failed to understand was that I did not need their recognition to know my worth. I had something stronger than a job title. I had leverage, and I had not even used it yet. Because what they did not see, what they refused to look closely at, was that their most valuable asset had not left the building. She was sitting quietly, watching and waiting, and very soon they would regret ever trying to erase her. They told me it was a temporary workspace while they figured out the next steps. That was the phrase they used. So vague it made me laugh. I followed the HR assistant down a hallway I had never bothered to walk before, past the server room, past storage, past janitorial supply. She stopped at a door with chipped paint and a dusty window covered by a torn privacy film. When she opened it, I genuinely thought she was joking. The room used to be the copy room. No windows, no phone, no light switch I could find. A broken desk leaned to one side like someone had kicked the leg and never fixed it. The chair had a rip down the back, and the door. It would not even close all the way. It swung half shut and stuck there. She said, "We are still working on your setup," and left before I could respond. They called it temporary. I called it a message, loud and clear. You are not wanted. You are not needed. Sit here quietly and fade. I was not just demoted. I was being buried. No one assigned to that room was meant to last. I had seen it happen before. A few months in that corner, and people either quit or got laid off. It was corporate exile, dressed up in recycled office furniture. But what made it worse was the silence. No one came to check on me. No one asked how I was doing. The same people who used to sit across from me in high-stakes meetings now walk by like I was a ghost. They had erased my name from the org chart, and now they were erasing my presence from their memory. 2 doors down, I could hear Joelle's new team settling into what used to be my conference room. They laughed too loudly, talked too much about things they barely understood, and acted like they had built the place themselves. One day, I passed by and saw someone had written "Legacy Closet" on my door in dry erase marker. I stood there and stared at it. Cute. Real professional. I guess when you do not have actual results to talk about, mocking the person who did becomes your fallback hobby. I did not erase it. I left it there. Let them laugh. Let them think I was finished. Let them decorate the cell they built for me while I quietly counted down the days until everything came crashing down on their heads. In that silence, something inside me shifted. At first it felt like grief, the loss of purpose, the disconnection, the humiliation. But then it started to change. It started to feel like clarity. That room gave me space to remember who I was before I let this company define me, before the long nights and canceled holidays, before I gave so much of myself that I forgot what I was worth. And in that stillness, one very specific detail came back to me. A clause I had written, a sentence buried deep inside that $1.18 billion contract, a sentence that, if read properly, would send a chill through every executive in the building. Clause 92. D. I remembered writing it late one night, weeks before the Strataverse deal was finalized. I added it quietly, carefully, not to deceive, but to protect. At the time, I had no idea they would betray me, but I knew how these people worked. I knew they loved to reap what they did not sow, and I knew I needed insurance. So I wrote that clause with the precision of someone who had been burned before, and I made sure it was written in language so plain, so dry, that no one would pay attention unless they were looking for it. And of course, no one had looked. While they were busy pushing me into that broom closet, they had no idea they were sitting on a live wire. They did not read the contract closely enough. They did not ask why Strataverse's legal team pushed back on every other detail, but not that one. They never even questioned it. They thought they had taken everything from me, but I still had the one thing they had never seen coming: a sentence, a signature, and $1 billion trap wrapped in plain white paper. I sat at that crooked desk in that miserable room and smiled for the first time in weeks. They thought they had buried me. But what they did not realize was I had planted the dynamite myself. I wrote Clause 92D the same way a chess player plans their final move, 10 steps ahead in absolute silence. It was late one night in March, a few days before the final contract with Strataverse was due. I had been in back-to-back meetings for 12 hours, my laptop battery at 7%, and a half-eaten protein bar on my desk. I stared at the agreement, line by line, scanning for any gaps. And that is when I saw it. A space in the operational section where no one had inserted final oversight language. It was standard practice to list project ownership, but in this case, that line had been left blank. Most people would have copied and pasted a generic clause, but I knew better. I had been through this before. I had watched other women get sidelined the minute the ink dried on a big deal. I was not going to let that happen to me. So I typed, slowly and deliberately, "All operational oversight and client coordination for Project Delta X shall remain under Ava Kincaid. Any transfer of authority without client sign-off voids the contract in full." No complicated words, no technical jargon, just simple, clear terms. It was the most powerful sentence I had ever written. It looked harmless. It read like routine policy. But it was a quiet bullet, tucked neatly between pages of budget tables and compliance codes. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I knew exactly who I needed to back it up. When I walked into the next meeting with Strataverse, I made sure to highlight the clause. Subtly, not enough to raise flags, but just enough to draw one specific pair of eyes to it. Miles Denham, the CEO of Strataverse, was not like most executives. He read everything, twice. He had built his company from scratch, and he did not trust anything he had not reviewed himself. After the meeting, he pulled me aside in the hallway, away from the others. He handed me a copy of the draft agreement and tapped the page with Clause 92D. He said, "This clause stays in, non-negotiable. If they give you trouble, tell them I approved it myself. I nodded. That was all I needed. Miles had just become my quiet ally. He did not need the politics. He just needed the project to run right, and he trusted me to do that. He told me once during a call, "We are not signing with Celestar, we are signing with you." That meant something. It meant everything. And it meant that the clause was not just a technicality. It was a shield. A few days later, the final agreement was sent to both legal teams. I watched Victoria Cho sign it without a second glance. She had been rushing to catch a flight. She barely read the last pages. Her initials landed right next to the clause in blue ink, under a sticky note she never removed. No one questioned it. No one flagged it. It was now legally binding, signed by both companies and locked in. I sat there and stared at the document as it printed, knowing exactly what I had just secured. It was not just a clause. It was leverage, the kind that stays quiet until the right moment and then shifts the entire power dynamic in one breath. What made it so perfect was how boring it looked. Clause 92D did not scream drama. It did not look like sabotage. It looked like a line written by someone just doing her job. That is the thing about corporate warfare. The smartest moves never make noise. They sit there quietly, collecting dust until someone trips over them. And then it is too late. Back then, I hoped I would never have to use it. I still believed, even after everything, that maybe Celestar would do the right thing, that maybe my loyalty, my work, and my results would matter. But the moment they pushed me into that windowless room and handed my title to someone else, I knew exactly what I had to do. I had spent months building that deal. I knew every clause, every signature, every intention behind every line. And now, they were sitting on a contract that had already signed their downfall, and they had no idea. Because while they were busy celebrating Joelle and pretending I never existed, I had already set the terms for their failure, quietly, legally, irrevocably. There are not many people in this industry you can count on. Most talk about loyalty until it is inconvenient. They will shake your hand, toast to your success, and then quietly step aside when you are no longer useful to them. But Miles Denham was different. He was blunt, direct, and had no time for performative professionalism. He saw through corporate smoke and mirrors within 5 minutes. He once told me during a tense video call halfway through the negotiation, "I am not buying Celestar's satellites. I am buying your mind, Ava." He meant it. He was not impressed by logos or PowerPoint decks. He cared about execution. And more importantly, he cared about trust. When we finally signed the deal, after 3 months of negotiations, 4 strategy rewrites, and 2 near walkouts, it did not feel like a finish line. It felt like a pact. The signing was private, just me, Miles, and 2 of his advisors. No big ceremony, no media, just a simple room with a conference table and a few strong cups of coffee. After the final signature, he did something unexpected. He reached into his briefcase and handed me a sealed envelope. No label, no explanation. He just said, "Keep this. You will know when it matters." I tucked it into my planner and did not open it until I was back at my hotel later that night. Inside was a handwritten note, just 1 sentence long. "If they forget you, I will not. If they remove you, the deal is dead." No signature, no date, just his words in black ink, written in the same deliberate all-caps style he used on every whiteboard. I read it 3 times. It did not feel like a compliment. It felt like a warning. And maybe on some level, he already saw what was coming before I did. I folded the paper, tucked it into my wallet, and carried it with me everywhere after that. At the time, I did not fully understand the weight of that message. But when Celestar stripped me of my title, moved me into a storage room, and pretended Joelle had closed the deal herself, I remembered the note. It hit me like a cold gust of air. Miles had not just trusted me. He had tied the entire future of Project Deltex to my name. And now, Celestar had broken that trust without even realizing it. They were too busy congratulating themselves, too busy erasing me from the narrative. They never stopped to consider that Strataverse had not signed with the company. They had signed with me. I remembered every conversation I had with Miles leading up to that deal. He did not want a flashy presentation. He wanted answers, real ones. When we met for dinner in New York, he asked about failure rates, budget burn, and vendor accountability. I was the only one at the table who answered directly, without fluff. He told me afterward, "That is the moment I decided I was in." From that point forward, he called me directly for every detail. He ignored Celestar's VPs. He refused to speak with junior managers. If I was not on the call, he would reschedule. That kind of loyalty is rare, and that kind of leverage is dangerous for people who do not understand where true power lives. So when they replaced me with Joelle and assumed the client would not care, they made the most critical mistake you can make in business. They underestimated the human connection behind the contract. They thought it was about numbers. But Miles had already made it clear it was about trust. He did not care about job titles. He did not care who sat in the corner office. He cared about follow-through, and they had just removed the only person he trusted to deliver. As I sat in that miserable office they stuck me in, I pulled out the note again. The paper was starting to fade at the edges, but the words were still clear. "If they remove you, the deal is dead." I smiled for the first time in days, because now I understood exactly why he had written it. Miles was not just protecting the deal. He was protecting the integrity behind it, and Celestar, in their arrogance, had walked right into a trap they never even saw. All I had to do was wait, and when the time came, I would not need to raise my voice or make threats. I would just show them the truth, in writing, signed, sealed, and undeniable. There are not many people in this industry you can count on. Most talk about loyalty until it is inconvenient. They will shake your hand, toast to your success, and then quietly step aside when you are no longer useful to them. But Miles Denham was different. He was blunt, direct, and had no time for performative professionalism. He saw through corporate smoke and mirrors within 5 minutes. He once told me during a tense video call halfway through the negotiation, "I am not buying Celestar's satellites. I am buying your mind, Ava." He meant it. He was not impressed by logos or PowerPoint decks. He cared about execution. And more importantly, he cared about trust. When we finally signed the deal, after 3 months of negotiations, 4 strategy rewrites, and 2 near walkouts, it did not feel like a finish line. It felt like a pact. The signing was private, just me, Miles, and 2 of his advisors. No big ceremony, no media, just a simple room with a conference table and a few strong cups of coffee. After the final signature, he did something unexpected. He reached into his briefcase and handed me a sealed envelope. No label, no explanation. He just said, "Keep this. You will know when it matters." I tucked it into my planner and did not open it until I was back at my hotel later that night. Inside was a handwritten note just 1 sentence long. "If they forget you, I will not. If they remove you, the deal is dead." No signature, no date. Just his words in black ink, written in the same deliberate, all-caps style he used on every whiteboard. I read it 3 times. It did not feel like a compliment. It felt like a warning. And maybe, on some level, he already saw what was coming before I did. I folded the paper, tucked it into my wallet, and carried it with me everywhere after that. At the time, I did not fully understand the weight of that message. But when Celestar stripped me of my title, moved me into a storage room, and pretended Joelle had closed the deal herself, I remembered the note. It hit me like a cold gust of air. Miles had not just trusted me. He had tied the entire future of Project Deltex to my name. And now, Celestar had broken that trust without even realizing it. They were too busy congratulating themselves, too busy erasing me from the narrative. They never stopped to consider that Strataverse had not signed with the company. They had signed with me. I remembered every conversation I had with Miles leading up to that deal. He did not want a flashy presentation. He wanted answers, real ones. When we met for dinner in New York, he asked about failure rates, budget burn, and vendor accountability. I was the only one at the table who answered directly without fluff. He told me afterward, "That is the moment I decided I was in." From that point forward, he called me directly for every detail. He ignored Celestar's VPs. He refused to speak with junior managers. If I was not on the call, he would reschedule. That kind of loyalty is rare, and that kind of leverage is dangerous for people who do not understand where true power lives. So, when they replaced me with Joelle and assumed the client would not care, they made the most critical mistake you can make in business. They underestimated the human connection behind the contract. They thought it was about numbers. But Miles had already made it clear. It was about trust. He did not care about job titles. He did not care who sat in the corner office. He cared about follow-through. And they had just removed the only person he trusted to deliver. As I sat in that miserable office they stuck me in, I pulled out the note again. The paper was starting to fade at the edges, but the words were still clear. If they remove you, the deal is dead. I smiled for the first time in days, because now I understood exactly why he had written it. Miles was not just protecting the deal, he was protecting the integrity behind it. And Celestar, in their arrogance, had walked right into a trap they never even saw. All I had to do was wait, and when the time came, I would not need to raise my voice or make threats. I would just show them the truth, in writing, signed, sealed, and undeniable. Joelle strutted through the departure terminal at Dulles in a bright red blazer like she was heading to a fashion shoot, not a billion-dollar satellite handover. I watched her board the first-class cabin with 2 assistants in tow. Toulouse, France, the Deltex integration launch site, was where I should have been. Instead, I was still sitting in my so-called temporary office, surrounded by broken filing cabinets and old toner cartridges. By mid-morning, Joelle was already flooding LinkedIn with hashtags. Your next-gen leadership, Hiner trailblazing women, on global tech. She even posted a selfie from the tarmac beside Strataverse's executive shuttle with the caption, "Bringing vision to life." What Joelle brought was not vision. It was chaos. She had no idea how to read the system's brief, let alone guide Strataverse through their first international integration. Within 72 hours, things started to unravel. Strataverse's engineers were confused. They had questions about telemetry sync protocols, fallback contingencies, and onboarding procedures. Questions Joelle could not answer. She reportedly redirected them to her chief of staff, who then emailed Strataverse, asking for my original project notes. I nearly laughed when I saw the request. Joelle had walked into a fire holding gasoline and a match. Then came the email. It arrived quietly, like a pebble tossed into still water, but it created ripples. No, waves. Strataverse's legal department sent a formal notice to Celestar's executive board. I still remember the exact wording. Per Clause 92D of Contract 7-Weighted FL, Project Deltex requires Ava Kincaid as sole liaison. This is a binding term. Any reassignment without prior client approval renders the agreement void. Effective immediately, integration is paused until this matter is resolved. 1 paragraph, 15 lines, and it detonated like a bomb inside Celestar headquarters. Victoria tried to pretend she had no idea. She called an emergency meeting, where she reportedly screamed into a phone for 20 minutes about rogue wording and unauthorized clauses. Silas, the head of operations, threw HR under the bus. He claimed my demotion had been a logistical miscommunication. Legal reviewed the file, and there it was. Clause 92D, signed, sealed, non-negotiable. Worse, Strataverse's CEO, Miles Denham, had personally co-signed the letter and demanded immediate reinstatement of the original project terms. Or the deal was off. The largest contract in Celestar's history was hanging by a thread only I could hold. Joelle flew back the next day. No blazer this time, just a gray hoodie, dark sunglasses, and a look I knew too well, panic. The moment she stepped into the building, she was told to wait outside the executive conference room while board members reviewed the Strataverse notice. By lunchtime, my phone buzzed. It was a message from someone in finance. You should come in, now. I walked through the main floor like a ghost returning to her own funeral. Every head turned. No one spoke. They all knew. The rumor had already spread. Ava Kincaid was back, and the building was holding its breath. Inside the glass-walled conference room, Victoria looked pale. Silas was pacing. Legal counsel had highlighted the clause on a projection screen, and no one could argue its intent. Gareth had been right. It was bulletproof. I stood silently in the doorway until someone finally acknowledged me. Victoria gestured toward the seat next to her. Ava, she said, her voice tight, we would like your help resolving this misunderstanding with Strataverse. I sat down slowly, calm, controlled. There is no misunderstanding, I replied. There is only a contract, one you signed, one I wrote. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift, not just in the room, but inside me. All the humiliation, the erasure, the backhanded betrayal, it had led to this moment. I did not need to shout. I did not need to threaten. All I had to do was let the facts speak. Clause 92D was the rope they had handed me, and I had tied it with care. Now they were the ones dangling. Watching them scramble was not revenge. It was justice. It was clarity. And it was just beginning. 1 week after Strataverse delivered their formal withdrawal letter, the impact hit like a tidal wave. The board tried to act like it was a temporary suspension, but anyone who had ever read a contract knew better. The wording from Strataverse was final, legally tight, and completely damning. The DeltaX project, the largest satellite integration initiative in Celestar's 28-year history, was dead. Over $1 billion vaporized in less than 7 days. The moment the news broke, Celestar's stock dropped by 9% before the market even finished its morning coffee. By noon, investors were dialing in from New York, London, and Singapore, demanding explanations. Why was the contract voided? Why was the lead liaison reassigned without client approval? Who made this call? Emails flew like shrapnel. Internal chats lit up with panic. People started printing resumes at their desks. You could feel the anxiety climbing the walls like smoke from a slow-burning fire. Everyone knew there was no covering this up. You do not lose a $118 billion deal without someone taking the fall. And this time, the usual scapegoats were not going to cut it. Then, the real bomb dropped. An anonymous tip, definitely not from me, of course, landed in the inbox of one of the top investigative tech reporters in the industry. The tip included internal memos, timestamps, meeting logs, and yes, a full copy of Clause 92D. Within 24 hours, 3 major tech news sites published the story under scorching headlines. Corporate ego destroys historic tech deal. Rising star undone by clause she never read. $118 billion lost over one signature. Screenshots of Joel's Bar Next Gen leadership post started circulating with brutal captions like, how it started, how it's going. Joel vanished. No more selfies, no press statements, no sassy hashtags. Just digital silence. Her assistant posted a vague update about taking time to refocus. But everyone knew what that meant. She had been benched. Hard. Victoria, for her part, issued a memo to the company titled Leadership Transitions, in which she announced she was stepping down to explore new opportunities and prioritize family. It was 3 paragraphs long, dry, hollow. No thanks, no emotion. Just a corporate disappearing act. Silas tried to hold the line. He released a carefully worded statement about internal misalignments and breakdowns in procedural protocol. Translation, damage control. But the board was furious, not the performative posturing kind of anger. They were genuinely livid, the kind of quiet boardroom rage that ends careers and rewrites power maps. I had been asked, politely of course, not to speak to press, not to comment publicly. And I did not. I did not need to. The paper trail was already out there, the contract, the clause, the demotion email. My name scratched off presentations. They had tried to erase me, and in doing so, they had lit the match themselves. All I had done was let it burn in plain sight. What shocked me most was how quickly the narrative flipped. 1 week earlier, I had been written off, replaced, mocked. Someone had literally labeled my door legacy closet with a dry erase marker. Now, those same people were whispering my name like it was a secret spell. She wrote the clause. She predicted this. She warned them. It was like watching a building collapse from a hilltop. You see the first crack, then the dust, then boom. I had not needed revenge. I had needed the truth to catch up, and it finally had. In boardrooms, in chat rooms, and all across tech news. And while the company scrambled to contain the fallout, I did something I had not done in months. I sat at a real desk, mine, and opened my personal notebook, the one I had started years ago. A list of ideas, big ones, smart ones, the kind that never saw daylight because I had been too busy cleaning up someone else's chaos. Maybe Celestar thought they had clipped my wings. Maybe they believed they had shut me down. But they had not noticed the most important thing. You do not bury someone like me. You just push us underground long enough to build something bigger. And now I was building. I was in the middle of making lentil soup, The kind you throw together on a quiet Sunday afternoon when the world feels heavy and you need something warm to ground you. I had just added the cumin when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was timing. I wiped my hands on a towel and answered, not expecting much beyond a robocall or a spam pitch. Instead, I heard a calm, confident voice. "Hello, is this Ava Kincaid? This is Elena Brooks, head of strategic growth at Helix Space. I hope I am not interrupting anything." I remember freezing for a second. Not because I recognized her name, but because I recognized the company, Helix Space, one of the fastest growing aerospace startups on the West Coast. They had been in the news for partnering with Strataverse on advanced low-orbit satellite mesh systems. I set the ladle down and walked over to the window, trying to collect my thoughts. "We were approached by Mr. Denham," she continued. "He recommended we speak with you directly. In fact, he was emphatic. He told us Ava is non-negotiable. If you want my satellites, you get her." His words, not mine. I did not say anything at first. I just listened. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Elena went on, her tone as steady as a surgeon's. "He has already given us a sense of your expertise, your oversight on Delta X, your role in Clause 92D. Based on his recommendation and our own due diligence, we would like to bring you in permanently, not just as a consultant. We are prepared to double your previous base salary, offer full equity, and let you name your team. Build it from scratch, on your terms." I turned away from the window, gripping the phone tighter. I had not expected this. I had not asked for this. But there it was, plain as day. A door opening. Not one I had knocked on, but one someone else had kicked wide open for me. "That is generous," I said finally. "We think it is fair," she replied, "and earned." She gave me a day to think about it. I did not need it. But I took it anyway, just to let the weight of the offer settle in. I walked around the block, letting the autumn wind wrap around me. I thought about all the meetings where I had been talked over, all the weekends I had given up for last-minute leadership reviews. I thought about the copy room they shoved me into, the way they tried to erase me, and how none of it had worked. Not really. This was not revenge. Revenge is sharp, cold. It is meant to hurt. This was something else. This was reward, a reward for staying quiet when it counted, for writing carefully, for trusting my own mind when others dismissed it, for planting a clause that had grown into something no one else saw coming, a single sentence that turned into $1 billion reckoning. And now, a new beginning. Later that night, I called Gareth. "I got an offer," I told him. "From Strataverse?" "No," I said, "Helix Space," but Miles set it in motion. He whistled. "That man plays chess while the rest of us play checkers." "Double salary," I said, "equity, my own team." There was a pause on the line. Then, "Damn, Ava, you did it." I did not answer right away. I looked down at my now-cold soup, still sitting on the stove. It could wait. I had something better to savor. Because the truth is, I never wanted to burn the place down. I just wanted to be seen, valued. Not for my title, not for a headline, but for the work, the mind behind the curtain. And now, someone saw it. They all did. I emailed Elena the next morning. One line, "Let us build something great." And just like that, I was no longer legacy. I was future. I joined Helix Space exactly 31 days after that phone call. The contract arrived in a thick white envelope, delivered by courier, not email. There was something ceremonial about it. My new title, Chief Mission Strategist. A mouthful, sure, but it was more than a title. It was proof that what I had built, fought for, and defended in silence was finally seen, finally valued, and finally honored. No questions, no debates, no second guessing. They trusted me to lead from day one. My first order of business was not flashy. I spent a week reviewing engineering drafts and integration plans. Then I met with Strataverse's new deployment team in person. Miles was there, of course, calm as ever, sipping coffee and pretending like we had not just burned down the old world to build a better one. But when he slid the new contract across the table and tapped Section 1 with his pen, I felt my throat tighten. He said, "Read that line out loud." I did. "All mission design, operational oversight, and external coordination shall be under the direct leadership of Ava Kincaid, Chief Mission Strategist, Helix Space." There it was, in clean black ink. No hidden clause, no buried footnote, no temporary status or implied hierarchy. Section 1, First page, my name. The value of the deal, $1.05 billion. Nearly as much as the last contract, but this time, done right. I signed it with a pen Miles handed me. It was heavy, made of brass, probably expensive. But what mattered more was that I was not just signing a deal. I was signing a new chapter of my life, one I wrote for myself. As for Celestar, the collapse was quiet but brutal. They laid off 40 employees within the next quarter. Some were good people, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. I felt for them. I really did. But the machine they were part of, led by ego, politics, and power games, had sealed its fate long before I left. Joelle? She resurfaced at a marketing agency 2 towns over, writing product copy for lifestyle brands. Her LinkedIn now talks a lot about mindfulness and leadership and team synergy. Cute. Victoria resigned the day the board forced a full audit. They called it a mutual decision, but we all know what that means. Silas disappeared. No press release, no goodbyes, just gone. His profile is still on LinkedIn, but it has not been updated in months. No new title, no current role, just a vague line about former tech executive. I guess that is what happens when your empire is built on air. And me? I work in a glass-walled office overlooking a launch pad. I built a team of engineers, analysts, and operators, half of whom were people Celestar once passed over. We meet every morning at 9 a.m. Sharp. We do not waste time on drama. We build, we solve, we focus. And every time I walk past the company mission etched on the lobby wall, I remember the copy room. I remember the door that would not close, the broken desk, the laughter in the hallway. And I remember that I never needed to yell. I just needed to write. That is what stayed with me the most. Not the fallouts, not the headlines, but the power of precision, of seeing 12 steps ahead when they were still playing short-term chess. The world had tried to erase me, rewrite me, reduce me to a leftover. But I had written myself into permanence, quietly, carefully, with one clause, one signature, one woman's refusal to be forgotten. People ask me now if I feel vindicated, if it felt like revenge. I just smile. No, I say, it felt like clarity. Because sometimes the sharpest weapon is not anger, it is foresight, it is restraint. It is that moment when you realize you do not have to shout to be heard. You just have to write the right line, in the right place, and wait for the world to read it. And they did. Legacy, it turns out, is not carved in stone. It is written in ink.